Hello everyone, this is Ari Moshe Wolf of Heart and Soul Centered Astrology. In this video, I'm going to share an overview of Uranus in Gemini through the 12 houses. Check out my most recent video where I shared my perspective on the core evolutionary meaning of this transit. So as I go through the 12 houses, I'll be reading my notes and expanding upon these ideas as I read them. My focus will be specifically on where we're breaking out of the limit, narrow, dualistic thinking of Gemini. That there are ways of thinking, ways of seeing reality, and thus information, perspective, and solutions that are accessible at a higher level of consciousness. And accessing that higher level of consciousness often means letting go of our attachments to our group identity or the ways that we've been trying to maintain a tidy intellectual framework that makes us feel secure about our ideas of reality. There is a potential and profound shift towards a greater, more inclusive way of thinking, but that can also be scary. And so this is a push towards evolution. It's very alive right now in this sextile with Saturn retrograde, in this strong trine with Pluto in Aquarius, ruling Pluto in Aquarius. So these are evolutionary themes that are active right now that are going to continue to be active. Now, I'll say one more thing. With Uranus soon to go back into Taurus, we're just sort of introducing these themes. All right, so what's kind of emerging right now is a snapshot of a much larger long-term evolutionary process that's going to even more significantly set in motion next year. Before I start, remember to like and subscribe and check out the description. I will often send out these articles. I'm going to be sending a really big, hefty newsletter with all of my writing on Uranus in Gemini a little bit later this week. You'll also receive updates and classes and all kinds of events that I'm sharing through this newsletter. You can subscribe to that. You can find a link to my sessions and my long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions for those that want to work with me on a more sustained basis. And my self-study program for those that would like to learn how to do this work in interpreting transits and natal charts from an evolutionary perspective. All of this in the description below. Lastly, my family and I will be traveling to France this next August. And on the week of August 15th and 16th, so Friday and Saturday, the 15th and the 16th, I'm going to be teaching in Paris. So the details are still coming together. I'll announce that when that is put together. But if you're in the area, if you're in Europe and you want to travel, it would be an absolute delight to get to share teaching in person and meet any of you. So stay tuned for more information, August 15th and 16th in France. All right, let's get started. Uranus in Gemini in the first house. This is about freedom of the mind. A new path to walk to the beat of your own free thinking. Here we are liberating from mental reactivity and freedom from impulsiveness. And thus, in that freedom from impulsiveness, meaning not just reacting to the first thought or the first idea, taking our perceptions as fact, right? We're creating some space from that. We create the ability to actually see the larger picture at play. Don't be afraid of making bold and new choices and asking questions that are new and setting on a path of discovery. This transit wants to open up a new path where we're thinking of things differently, and thus the opportunity to be making new choices and kind of forging our life's direction opens up. And it's actually very natural to feel surprised, like, oh, I didn't know I would be doing this. I didn't think I would be going here. This is a big part of what happens with Uranus and Gemini, to have a very open mind. The moment you think that you know where it's all going is the moment you trap yourself into an idea of the past. Keep your mind unhindered so you can access new thoughts and be completely free to make whatever new choices your higher self is signaling you to make. This is a piece with Uranus in general. The higher self meaning our future self, meaning ourself, that which is already real, that which we are beyond the developmental process of time. Right? When we get these signals from a higher self, it's like the signals from our soul, from our essence, our individuated beingness. And in time, in the Saturn dimension, we're evolving, we're growing. There's a process that we're undergoing in our own soul evolution, but our beingness is. So oftentimes there's like this dissonant signal coming from seemingly the future or where we have not yet gone, but it's really just coming from what is reaching through time relative to where we have not yet realized what we are. So the path and the journey of our own individuation might at times feel very non sequitur. It's like, I don't get how that has anything to do with what I'm doing or where my life is. And that's often what happens with Uranus, especially Uranus and Gemini trining Pluto. I mean, there's so much in this transit, in the transits right now, that say there are ways of thinking that are beyond the scope of our conditioned pathways. Perhaps we're not in touch or aware of the actual algorithm, the actual path of our soul trajectory. It's really interesting to think about that. Okay. Second house. Sometimes being radical accidentally becomes a rut of self-isolation, circulating the same unconventional thoughts, but actually getting stuck in your own convention. Don't get stuck in your own intellectual self-reliance. Your free thinking is your greatest resource. If you can access it, you will get in the flow of life and all the things that you need to live well. This is because you are literally or metaphorically stepping outside of what is known and familiar, willing to ask new questions, which will in turn elevate the frame from which you understand your life, its value, and what you are living for. The point is, we create a stagnation when we become too dependent on the world that we know. Even if it's like a radical or unconventional world, there's a whole life, an ecosystem of existence that's also very co-creative and collaborative beyond what we know. Being out of the familiar, far from what you know, means your Gemini inner map doesn't already know where all of your basic needs are and where it'll all be met. This is because the old way simply won't work anymore. It's either boring, repressive, or simply it's not your way. Embrace insecurity and strive to see clearly. Uranus brings us into a relationship with community, while individuation is necessary and perhaps a part of the process. And at times you might need to do your own thing and not be involved in what others are doing. You may also find that your own needs are met by connecting with a larger, more holistic, communal way of thinking about your life and how we all survive together. I mean, I often say this, it just blows my mind. Just like if I walk down the street, how many resources there are in each individual property. Toilets, leaf blowers, right? Like we all have our own thing. It's because we're living in a very isolated nuclear kind of way of thinking. If we just open up the doors and just think differently, we're going to map a world where my survival and your survival are interdependent. Because we're thinking in terms of community, and thus more becomes possible when we're orienting from a place of sharing and not that second house, me and mine kind of mentality. Third house. People will gather the information and the ideas that fit one's own tribal identity. The unspoken aim is actually not to learn, but rather to maintain intellectual security. Well, this is a time to ask critical questions, to think out of the box just a little bit. The box represents here the tidy intellectual frame that we have set in our mind around the world around us. Everything can be explained in empirical terms. And as long as everything is true and conforms to what we've put in this box, then our inner equation is sound. But it often just takes one open-minded and free of agenda question to render the entire equation flawed. People will defend their logical ideas until they get to the point in their own soul growth where they are willing to learn. Again, learning always happens when we're available for it. The availability to learn precedes learning. Otherwise, the entire data of existence can be sitting right in front of us and we wouldn't see it. And actually, the entire data of existence is sitting in front of us, and I'm not speaking about the internet. There's a deeper spiritual dimension of everything being available, but we all have our own limits and sheaths, so to speak, that keep us from actually accessing that. It's a part of what's happening on this incarnational journey. Don't worry about standing out. Others will understand or get it later. Everything always catches up, but sometimes we have thoughts and ideas or questions that others aren't thinking, and that's okay. And your job is to stay present and ask the questions that allow for a higher understanding of whatever you are desiring to learn. On a more mundane level, this can simply mean you're drawn towards accessing higher realms of knowledge or information. Right? You put down the Googling or the scrolling different random conversations and social media distractions, and you say, I'm going to research and actually acquire concrete information and perspective. It's taking our learning and our communication and our acquiescence of data to a much higher level, bringing more intelligence into it. Fourth house. Now, what I find really amazing about human behavior is that we are clan-oriented. We care about family and belonging. And this is a behavior that I find is an intelligent part of the survival of the human species, that we care for each other. We learn to clan together so that we can care for each other's needs. I mean, on a very basic biological level, we need family. We come into family, we need family to be cared for, to be loved, to be grown, to be protected. But the issue in the modern day and age is where family becomes this very isolated nuclear space where you have maybe a mom and dad and a couple siblings and that's it. And maybe a pet, right? Our sense of community is so narrow that we're not caring for each other. So we don't understand that that fourth house dimension of care and nurturance can actually be a lot better if we expanded beyond our own limited sense of reality. And this is actually more common in non-Western cultures, where we have people sticking together as opposed to in more Western cultures, family units will just kind of disperse and go all over the place, right? So we'll have, several nuclear units, aunts, uncles, grandparents, grandchildren, and many cousins. These families thrive, needs are met, and there is generally a strong sense of home and belonging, something that's often lacking in more westernized cultures. I have a friend in Ramallah, an astrologer, who actually has an aunt in Gaza who has 70 cousins. It's something I've learned from different YouTubers in Gaza. Since many homes were destroyed, people are kind of clanning together. It's like we're going to have our oven and our home and our charging station. People are really thinking about each other, not just in terms of physical resources, but, cooking for each other, caring for each other, making sure all the kids are being cared for. When we think in that way, life feels much more real, more authentic, and more relevant, right? And I find it interesting that when our typical sense of home is disrupted, we get creative and we find ways to care for each other. We're a lot more ingenious and thoughtful. We all lean in and we share what we can, as opposed to everyone gets their own kitchen and your kids and my kids, and we're not connected. When circumstance breaks up the maps of how we live our life, we all lean in. And it's actually what happens often is a lot more creative and intelligent and evolved. It's a very interesting thing how that works out, right? It's like there's Saturn conventions, when that's broken down, oftentimes Uranus expresses as an unexpected shift towards a much more evolved and intelligent way of living, even if it looks on the surface to be less than it was. Our sense of home doesn't need to just be our own biological family, but rather the extension of community. Expand your Gemini mind, the limited map of what makes you feel at home and feel at home. I'm going to slow down here. The limited map of what makes you at home and feel at home. This might mean blending two otherwise different groups with each other, but finding that a unique ecosystem is created that is far more nourishing and healing for you and for those that you care about. Otherwise, don't let yourself get emotionally stifled. Open your inner and outer metaphorical or literal home to more diversity and unpredictability, to more experience that will just feel a lot better. Just because the world does something one way doesn't mean that you have to as well. Fifth house. There is no one creative medium or expression to encompass the brilliance of your soul. Let go, break loose, and use all of the resources available to express your essence. Gemini in this signature operates in a deeply brilliant and versatile way. The only thing you need to do is to let go of the hyper concern with what it looks like to be you, what people will like or what people will enjoy, if they'll throw you tomatoes or if they'll throw you flowers. Rick Rubin once taught that when we create our art, we'll do it because we love it, even if we have to do some other job to create the time for it. I absolutely love this idea. Break all the mental boxes of how things work and what is allowed. Did you think that you were an oil-based painter, but now you like watercolors? Or perhaps you do online digital music and you want to start hosting electronic dance parties. It's only when we put ourselves in a box of what our expression is that we begin to feel stifled and kind of limited to these expressions. We are creative beings, and as we access our own creativity, we actually access a greater, higher divine intelligence that reflects the intelligent design of creation itself. Right? We're actually attuned to a vibrational reality that expresses in our own creativeness. It's much more than just, this is my work as a creative person. It goes without saying that there's a certain vulnerability in being seen. If you feel terrified and nervous about how courageous and bold you think you need to be, then you are definitely on the right track. It's just that you are giving yourself more permission to open your intellectual creative resources. It's deeply vast and it's deeply fun, and it's natural to feel a little bit terrified here. Also, in terms of children and your own creations, open your mind. There are so many ways to educate, to teach, to nurture the intellectual development of our children far beyond the boxes of what society says. So look to see where things feel stifled or boring or unexciting. Uranus says there is a lot of opportunity here for a more authentic expression of your own creative intellectual intelligence. There's something more real to who you are as a soul if you're willing to step outside of the frame of the known and how you've been thinking until now. Uranus in Gemini in the 6th house. The signature reminds me of a fun analogy that Jeff Green used to teach about the famous centipede with 100 legs. If it tries to track all of its individual legs, okay, this one moves and then that one moves, it will trip all over itself. It really just needs to walk, and the legs will move on their own. It's designed to operate in a cohesive way. It has its own intelligence, and it works just right. We can get all jumbled up with too many ideas, metaphorical computer tabs open, and starting so many projects that we do not complete any of them. This signature invites us to step back from the tedious details of all the things we are organizing and working on, and to start to see it all from a higher perspective. In this higher objective perspective, there's a way that everything operates as a whole organism, but we can't access that if we're stuck in the details. From the point of view of the details, Gemini in the 6 is very specific. It's very mechanical. And so we can really get lost in all the different working parts of our life where it's like nothing is ever complete, or there's always another piece or another angle or some more data or something to work out or more questions to ask. But that whole paradigm shifts when we grasp the larger bird's eye view of the whole organism. Here's an interesting story. So I've had a sore lower back for a while, and my time with a certain healer didn't help too much as I felt he was just dealing with individual parts and not adequately seeing the interconnection of the whole. This signature is about liberating from control, 6th house, from the need to have it all mentally organized, Gemini. This keeps us narrow in our thinking and keeps us stuck in an ongoing crisis of management. I got this fixed out, but gotta fix it here. Then wait, there's something over here. It's like constantly juggling balls. And the mind never rests. And sometimes what happens in the 6th house is we subconsciously create a reality for ourselves where we won't be able to just relax and rest. So this keeps us narrow in our thinking and keeps us stuck in an ongoing process of management. And I just read that line, and that's okay. Amazingly, we often create more problems for ourselves while trying to fix the ones we think we have. So regarding this back, yesterday while I was writing this article, before I wrote this article, I had a very interesting experience. So I spent about probably a cumulative 3 hours with my kids, walking from the gym to the playground. Then we decided, let's go to the forest behind the playground. And long story short, for whatever reasons, I alternated during really hot weather, shortage of food, with the majority of the time carrying a toddler on my back, a baby in a stroller, and my 5-year-old alternating between sitting at the foot of the stroller and walking. It was tedious, hot, difficult, but because I was holding all this pressure on my back and pushing a stroller, also holding a basket in one hand, I had to be very mindful of my posture. I had to really be aware of like, okay, I'm, hinging at the pelvis. And I was also barefoot out of my own choosing because I like being barefoot. Nonetheless, it's walking on a lot of rocks. But when you're barefoot, I find I have to engage my core strength a lot more. Right, so all of that combined, there's a lot of alignment and core strength and just being very in my body, but holding my posture in a very unique way. After all of that, I was sweating. It was tedious, kind of fun and challenging at the same time. I noticed that my back felt so much better, like 60% better or something like that. I wasn't thinking about my physical pain. I wasn't trying to make it feel better. It just happened. Sometimes changing the conditions of one's reality brings perspective and healing to what the mind couldn't otherwise figure out. I was probably doing the kind of thing I would have done if I took one of those core balancing classes that I keep on seeing on Facebook. And now that I'm saying those words, core balancing, my phone's going to pick it up and I'm going to get more of those advertisements, but so be it. Where you like do movements and I'm sure I was following a lot of these principles, but I was actually in the experience of it. And this very much reminds me of that centipede, kind of moving, and it kind of just all works out on its own. Further, being barefoot probably helped me more than I realized, and I just love everything about being barefoot. So anyway, this is not going to become a habit. I'm not going to make it like a weekly practice of carrying children on my back and walking through strollers, but this teaches me a lot about we can understand the healing process when we get out of the limited frame of our diagnosis and problem solving. There's a much larger framework for understanding solutions. When we just shift our environment and our experience and our perspective, solutions often happen on their own. 7th house. We know that one partner cannot ever meet all of our needs. We also know that people are who they are. We cannot change them to conform to who we want them to be, just as much as we cannot successfully change ourselves to become what another person wants us to become. This signature is about real, objective listening. Consider that Gemini corresponds to the physiology of hearing, actual hearing, while the 7th house corresponds to the psychology of listening. We will experience immense cognitive dissonance and alienation in our relationships when other people aren't how we have ordered them to be in our minds. It's a fact of listening with no preconception or mental structure for how and what things are supposed to be that we can actually learn about one another. Consider that all of our relationships have their own evolutionary trajectory. They evolve according to the nature of the soul itself. We already are what we are. And each relationship needs the openness and the space for the individuality of each individual to naturally grow into the partnership that it naturally wants to become. The emergence of a relational ecosystem, which is between two people, but also the larger environment and context that comes together in the context of a binary relationship between two souls, happens on its own when we're not suppressing ourselves or trying to fit into some idea or expectation of what we should be. Sometimes this signature will hold and allow two completely incongruent thoughts to coexist. And I love this about Gemini. In this case, one person has a need and the other person has a very different, almost antithetical need. When both are held and allowed to exist, something new emerges that neither individual could possibly predict or control. The mind just needs to be open and unfixed for this path to reveal itself on its own. Otherwise, we're trying to fit, well, I'll compromise here and you'll compromise here, but like, why? Often a lot of our compromising is because we're trying to fit a relationship into how we've logically ordered it to be, because that produces security. It makes us feel the way that we want to feel in the context of the relationship. But that keeps a lot of suppression, and there's really not a lot of happiness ultimately in that. But allowing these contradictions or these incompatible elements to exist, it allows for the ecosystem to emerge. When there's an ecosystem, and it's beyond just two, right? It's not about other people, just that. It could be. It could also be about just life and how there's more diversity and experience in life around any two people. The ecosystem created around a relationship will create the context for so much more possibility and mutual support that wouldn't happen if there's a whole lot of compromise. Otherwise, a big dynamic with the signature is a person comes forward with these needs and these feelings, and it doesn't make sense. It's like you're reading a novel, and you turn the page and suddenly it's like you're reading a completely different novel. It's like it was first person, now it's third person. It was a storybook, now it's like a nonfiction. And it just feels totally incongruent and non sequitur. But this is what happens when we repress ourselves to fit in, to belong, to be accepted. We might find that for ourselves, suddenly new thoughts and ideas that will emerge almost very strongly, and we can't fit in anymore to what we've made ourselves become for others. This signature is fundamentally about freedom from expectation. 8th house. This transit invites us to step back and understand that there are deeply subconscious roots to our present perceptions. Most of us don't realize that the majority of what we see is rooted in past life impressions. We all have a deep subliminal soul memory of our past, but we are not conscious of it. As a result, we will recreate circumstances via the recreation of our predictable perceptions, and then often fall into the same traps over and over and over again. Relative to the 8th house, this transit invites us to become better inner forensic soul detectives. See all the data of your life as pointing to a deeper bottom line understanding that all lies within. Draw your attention within to a more single pointed stillness. This transit is liberating you from the trap of getting stuck in analyzing other people's motives, getting lost in endless mental traps to somehow find security through the non-ending grasping mind. Or to continually explore the dark, the taboo, that there's something more to learn and unpack here. We can become obsessive, in a sense, in taking all of the data literally, instead of seeking to understand what is this pointing to about my own self, what inner investigation can I be exploring right now? The inner impulse at the core here is to get to the bottom line of our own thinking, to remember our own soul. This is also a great time to follow your own natural calling to whatever information, conversations, content, investigations seem to be drawing you in. There might be areas of life or relationships or just topics where it's like you couldn't quite understand it, right? It's like you're operating here, you're operating on like a social media level, but you want to like operate on a much deeper, true forensic investigative level. Taking your inquiry on a deeper level, which is, not just being a passive victim to whatever information you're encountering in life. Slowing down, focusing your questions, we can kind of gauge a much larger bird's eye insight to the inner psychological dynamics or workings that are happening in our life if our soul is really drawn towards that. So whatever information or content or investigations are drawing you, go for it. It's okay to become obsessed sometimes. Right? That obsession is there's something for your soul. You're impelled to osmose something, and that's going to help you in your own ongoing liberation. Don't be afraid to jump in completely and let it change you. But if we become obsessed and we're kind of losing our peace or stuck in a victimization, then our thoughts are taking us outside of ourselves. That means the information is actually not helping us kind of cultivate deeper self-knowledge or uncover deeper truth or insight. It's kind of getting us obsessed and a little bit outside of ourselves, right? Generating negative energy, negative mindsets, addictive mindsets. So the key with Gemini in the 8th is to use the mind to uncover more of the data, more of the truth, get to the core of it, which should actually free us from fear, free us from victimization, free us from entanglements, free us from disempowerment, right? Not actually get us further stuck in it. Uranus and Gemini in the 9th house. What's interesting here is that our journey, our spiritual path, our expansion of consciousness can also ultimately, after having had the insight, be explained in empirical terms. There's this teacher that I've been following recently that talks about different spiritual practices from a particular lineage, and he describes the mechanics of these practices, like what actually happens in these various meditative states from a very biophysical point of view. Like what's actually happening in the brain. It's all very data driven. So he's taking what's otherwise could be this like mystical or this very conceptual, experience. And then if you hear about it, becomes like a belief, like, oh yeah, this is what happens when you meditate, but we don't necessarily know it directly. And he makes it very empirical, very tangible, very accessible, so that we can actually track it, learn about it, and here are the signs, here are the markers, here's how we can work with it. Almost like giving a roadmap for the spiritual journey. And I love that here because the core of this signature really is about liberating the mind from beliefs, from dogmas. We're not wanting to get stuck in any kind of belief system or broad, oh, this is just how it is. We want direct knowledge, direct insight, direct perception. The signature is about liberating from beliefs and dogma. Open your mind and be curious about your own personal direct experience. If it's meditation, a path in life that you are on, keep your mind open to ask the questions that will open the doors to greater insight. But don't just fall into believing or practicing. The questions are the key. What is it? What's actually happening here? The alternative is to simply create an intellectual frame for everything you think you already know, and to truly not grow or expand your understanding of life in any way at all. And we have it all kind of mapped out already. There will be no questions, no critical thinking, and thus no learning. At times, this transit can bring up a sense of confusion, a dissonance between our intuitive right brain and our empirical left, with sometimes certain ideas making total sense, while others seeming incongruent and not working well together. The key is to come back to the path, the present moment where all things begin to make sense as we become available for the learning. Empirical knowledge follows intuitive and direct experience. We can know what we know because we know it, and then we can talk about it, classify it very easily. We can't go the other way around. We can't classify and explain empirically something that we don't know, something that we haven't experienced. Experience comes before the linear logical understanding, and that's the key here. All right. Stay open to the path. Don't try to organize it before you walk it. But also, don't let your mind get too fixed on what you think the path is. One dynamic for the signature can be a breaking down of the rigid boundaries or structures that we've established around our idea of the path or our sense of our spiritual journey. So often, where we don't progress spiritually is because we've settled into crystallized beliefs and ideas, and so the authentic present inquiry is then lost. And we no longer really advance because we're actually not present anymore. We're just in a loose frame of some belief that we're repeating over and over and over again. All right. 10th house. Most people in this world will adopt to the current cultural or social ideas of what it means to be a human. The goals in life, how to participate in society, what it looks like to be a successful human being. This works for the majority of people that need to fit in and maintain a sense of social identity and continuity. However, when it comes to Uranus, many souls will find that they simply do not fit into the boxes. What do you want to be when you grow up? Perhaps you wear many hats, and perhaps those hats don't make sense in your existing social reality. They don't have to. This transit is about liberating from the fear of judgment and the need to mold or mask yourself to fit into some box you believe you need to fit into in order to be worthy and acceptable in society. The core of the 10th house is self-responsibility and self-authority. So think for yourself. Be your own spiritually mature adult who will make their own adult decisions regardless of what society thinks you should be or should do. And I want to highlight an essential quality here. So, for some souls, Uranus in this position can express as a total disregard of ethics, right? Like, I'm going to do whatever I want, the rules don't matter. And that's sort of a distorted expression of the liberated quality of Uranus. In its negative expression, this is more so the disregard of thinking of the community. I'm disregarding morality. I'm disregarding ethics. I'll do whatever I want. I don't care what happens to other people or how that negatively influences the whole. I'll break the traffic light rules and run a red light. I don't care. The rules are stupid anyway. So that's more of a rebellious quality to Uranus that isn't grounded in any true liberation. It's just sort of separating from a humanity, actually. And so to think for yourself is to also discern for yourself what it means to be an ethical member of society while also remaining true to your own soul nature, right? It's a difference between breaking rules because you don't want to be limited versus knowing how to liberate from the rules. Liberation from the rules and the concrete value we give to moralistic notions of right and wrong are often a part of this. Rules serve a purpose. Keep your attention on the purpose, not the rules. Then you won't have to make this, then you won't have to make sense of the world. You'll make sense to yourself. Right? So it's a difference between, knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them. For example, I love following the rules and I love breaking the rules. And I have a very strong inner sense of when it's okay to break the law, right? For example, I love the forest and the trees. I have a relationship to them, right? Although there's a sign that says, this forest is a part of a park. It's closed after a certain time of day. Do I walk there at night? Sometimes I do. Do I ever for a minute feel like I'm breaking the law? No, I don't. Because the law is for protection, right? It's nighttime, it's unsafe, they have boundaries around it. I understand intuitively what the law serves, and I can respect that. But I don't need to follow it. Versus all kinds of other laws and rules that I'm not going to violate because it makes sense and it's functional, right? There's a Saturn dimension to our life, but we need to be able to think outside of the box of the right and the wrong so we don't become unnecessarily conditioned by an abstract idea of, oh, don't do this, don't break the laws. And that has to be true for you. We have to find our own ethic, our own sense of how do we embody our own sense of right and wrong and not be overly conditioned by the fear of punishment or the fear of social judgment. So much of our consciousness easily becomes conditioned by the fear of, I'm going to be judged, that I'm going to be an outsider. I'm not going to be functioning in society, right? It's like there's a deep, for many of us, there can be a deep soul memory of being that outsider, not wanting to become an outcast, wanting to be included. But then what do we give up of ourselves? What do we repress just to be not judged? 11th house. I like this signature because we'll find a lot of people surprising themselves and others when they suddenly find themselves interested in groups and communities that were otherwise not for them. This can be a swing towards conservatism or liberalism or a movement away from any kind of ism, and finding a community that offers another angle. The point is that we are going to continually finding ourselves navigating the duality and polarization of sides, groups, me and them versus them. The more we are identified with belonging, with finding some kind of group identity. This is the prime signature of our thinking outside of the box, which would be better framed as think of other things than the thoughts contained within the box. This is about opening the mind to a larger intelligence and thus coming into resonance with community and groups that will offer angles and ideas that you never thought of before, even if those groups are very much not what you thought you'd be associating with. Sometimes the greatest growth happens when we find ourselves exploring pathways and friendships that we never thought we would have. The magic of Gemini here is the freedom from classification and fixed ideas about reality. This also means not giving into the way that masses of people constantly confuse opinions with facts. This can feel terrifying, as that kind of freedom has gotten people killed in the past. However, once we have a new thought, we'll start having conversations and meeting people we never thought we would meet. Our sense of community becomes much more diverse in ways we couldn't have predicted. This is all healthy because the commonality of humanity is not found in our group affiliations, but in the intelligence of humanity itself. This is something we can all relate to. So this idea of facts and opinions, just to explain this further, an opinion is an association you give it, right? You see a headline or you see a person, you see a man with ragged clothing on walking slowly down the street and he looks really dirty and you say, oh, he's homeless. That's an opinion, but then you say, oh, I saw a homeless man. You don't know that, right? It's not a fact necessarily. We'll make a lot of our own mental classifications to be fact because we just assume it to be true. And then we kind of join with groups and these opinions become a framework for our reality. So we need to liberate from that and ask questions. And in fact, we get out of our limited, narrow, organized world and we get more into our humanity. Who is this person? What are you? Beyond these words, beyond these classifications, we actually meet one another as we are. That's why we get out of these boxes of right and left and all these different groups. There's a getting clear-minded here. This signature is also highly scientific and wants to look at reality from a far more objective bird's eye lens. The point is to not accept any ideas or information at face value, but to look for yourself. It's okay if people don't understand you or think you are too fringe. It just means there are probably lots of other people that you have yet to meet. And when necessary, be an intellectual community of your own. Don't try to fit in any of the boxes. Be true to yourself. Many of the thoughts that you think are in fact because your actual brain is connected to the intelligent design of creation itself. Resonate with the cosmos. There's a lot more to know. And so what happens when we stay free of opinion and we just keep on looking? We keep the mind open for more perception. 12th house. This is an exciting transit that can highlight the extreme of confusion and cognitive dissonance on the one hand, and profound spiritual revelation on the other. The essence of this is a total breakdown and disillusion of everything you thought to be true. The mind forms certain conclusions and gives ultimate meaning to those conclusions. As a result, we feel that we understand what's going on and can feel secure about our worldview. So I was watching a well-known MAGA political commentator speak about his feelings about Trump, telling the world that there are no Epstein files, case closed, nothing to reveal, etc. Right? All of this relative to his deep belief that Trump was the man that was going to be transparent and reveal the files. I mean, this is a big part about what Trump ran on, right? I can tell this man was going through a massive disillusionment. He believed that Trump would reveal the truth, and that justice would be served to all the innocent victims of human trafficking. He and many others really cared and really believed that Trump would do the right thing and that justice would be served. He felt that Trump was just gaslighting the entire nation in not revealing the truth. This man was actually, his mouth was watering, he was actually beginning to feel sick on live TV, getting ready to throw up. That's how deep it was for him. Interestingly, the next day, this man came back with a new, brilliantly organized explanation for why Trump didn't release the files. Basically, a way to hold on to the illusion about Trump that gave him something to believe in. So this is a big thing to understand here. When we're faced with our illusions, and then they're broken, like the sandcastle that we built is not true, there's a necessity of reconciling. So either there's disillusionment, and that's very scary. Like, what do we believe in? What's true? I can't believe the Democrats, then I can't believe Trump. Who do I believe in? What's real? What do I, how do I know what's true anymore? Or to avoid the utter breakdown of our worldview, if you've given our life from a 12th house point of view, it's like what we believe in, we free fall, we trust it, we surrender to it unconditionally. For many people, that's what Trump is. Total trust. Which is what allows a lot of people to overlook a lot of what to me are just obvious red flags about the soul. And so when that which we've given meaning is dissolved, one pathway is to further uphold that meaning by creating a new logical framework to explain why things aren't the way we thought they would be. Well, here's why, and I've seen this with several people. Here's an explanation for why the files aren't being released. It's, and so in the end, we can kind of keep our worldview. We just added a new, very logically sounding explanation for why things are. And so we don't have to worry about our own disillusionment. So when our entire structure falls apart, that's a very painful experience, one that can take a long time to reconcile with. On a higher level of insight, this transit is a realization that this life is just a dream. We collect data, we put it together to describe what's going on, but we often fail to recognize that all of the data that we perceive are just archetypal symbols pointing to ideas more than facts. This is a vibrational reality, however we make the metaphor literal, and then we try to give that metaphor ultimate meaning. This is a great transit to begin to go within, to seek higher purpose and meaning in your life beyond how you've already made it all make sense. For some, this will mean becoming an instrument for spiritual knowledge or information that will serve in the oneness. But you have a role to play. Your mind is to be a conduit of information, or perhaps forming a relationship to a spiritual field of knowledge for you that will help you on your own journey of dissolving the boxes and the ideas and the frames and the judgments and all of that So you become more available to reality, to truth. Let your mind be shaped by love, something higher than your own current understanding. There are also truly no limits to the communication means of Uranus and Gemini when placed in the 12th house. Conversing with angels is no more or less realistic than a conversation with a friend at a cafe. All of existence, as mysterious or odd as it can sound to us or unknown, all of it can be ultimately understood in direct empirical terms. It's all right here, it's all accessible, even the mystical. We just don't understand it yet, and so we just can say it's mystical or otherworldly, but it's also real, and what's real can be accessible. This is why love is what it is. It reaches everything and in all ways. Let love guide your learning journey. Don't be afraid of what you might learn. Fundamentally, don't be afraid of being wrong. My friend M. Soval once said, "Awakening is the realization that I was wrong." Whew, thank God, right? Allowing ourselves to be wrong simply means we've given meaning to the metaphor. We've taken the data and we've said, this is the sandcastle that it means. It's actually just a sandcastle. To that open question that we're remaining with, like, then what's true? That's the humility from which we actually don't decide what's true. We don't say, oh, this is what life means. We allow meaning to be revealed because we didn't create meaning, love. We didn't create it. We didn't create ourselves. We didn't create creation. What is real is. Love is. We didn't invent it. And so meaning already exists. And thus we're learning to actually open to it, to be a servant of it, to trust it completely more than everything else that we've given our life and our meaning to. All right. This completes my analysis of Uranus and Gemini through the 12 houses. As always, thank you so much for watching.